This is Dr. Sam Goldhaber for Clot Chronicles, speaking to you about the results of the Mariner trial, which were presented at the European Society of Cardiology meeting in Munich. Mariner was a 12,000 patient trial designed to reduce death, pulmonary embolism, and DVT during the first month after hospitalization in patients hospitalized with medical illness. And in this trial, at the time of hospital discharge, patients were randomized either to receive rivaroxaban or its placebo. And then they were followed to see whether they survived, whether they developed a clinical episode of pulmonary embolism or a clinical episode of DVT. And it turned out that the primary endpoint of reducing the venous thromboembolism-related mortality and reducing pulmonary embolism and DVT, all as a combined endpoint, that was not met. However, a secondary endpoint of reducing symptomatic DVT and pulmonary embolism was met in the Mariner trial, where rivaroxaban was superior to placebo. And I think this gives us an interesting option. It's not an FDA-approved regimen for patients being discharged from the hospital, but it's something that I think should be considered by the FDA. We already have one FDA-approved anticoagulation regimen with betrixaban. Betrixaban in the APEX trial of medically ill hospitalized patients actually started the betrixaban during hospitalization rather than at the conclusion of hospitalization, and continued betrixaban for a total of 35 to 42 days and found a reduction in asymptomatic pulmonary embolism and DVT, a reduction in symptomatic pulmonary embolism and DVT, a reduction in stroke, a reduction in fatal and irreversible events, a reduction in venous thromboembolism-related rehospitalization within 30 days. And so I think that the APEX trial with betrixaban and the Mariner trial with rivaroxaban are both telling us that this 1 month after hospital discharge is a critically important month with a high pulmonary embolism and DVT event rate. And now we have anticoagulation regimens that address this specific issue. This is Dr. Sam Goldhaber signing off for Clot Chronicles.
Hello, this is Dr. James Welker. I'm the Director of Advanced Medical Therapeutics for Anne Arundel Health System and have been given the opportunity to comment on the VTE prevention population and trials for which Dr. Goldhaber has provided an excellent review in today's Clot Chronicles. The Mariner trial is the most recent of 5 high-quality studies assessing medical prophylaxis in patients with recent hospitalization due to a non-surgical illness. These began with the Exclaim trial and includes ADOPT, Magellan, APEX, and now Mariner trials. We began with the idea that post-hospitalization anticoagulation may be helpful for medical patients, but initially found that any reduction in VTE was offset by excess bleeding in early trials. In today's Clot Chronicles, Dr. Goldhaber described the Mariner and APEX trials that by optimizing the treatment selection and patient population were able to demonstrate the described benefits with a reduction of the bleeding risk. In addition to Dr. Goldhaber's review, it is noticeable that the APEX trial accepted a broader range of patients of the 2 trials. Mariner's patient selection was dependent on the improved score, excluded patients with GFR less than 30, and reduced the dose for GFR 30 to 50 mL per minute, whereas the APEX patient population was heavily influenced by age and D-dimer and included a broader range of CKD patients by including patients with a GFR as low as 15 mL per minute, and dose adjustment for those 15 to 30 mL per minute. Both trials cautiously excluded patients with an increased risk of bleeding, and while patients with active cancer were included in the APEX trial, these were excluded from the Mariner trial. While continued review of APEX trial data identified the described broad range of patient benefits, the Mariner trial has just completed its primary data analysis. As we consider how to utilize this new information, I believe the following questions will help us. First, what additional benefits will be identified with further analysis of the rivaroxaban trial data that may include data from both the Mariner and Magellan trials? These two trials provide a large data set to analyze for rivaroxaban. How will these additional findings compare to those found from the APEX trial? How will the regulatory bodies analyze the data? These questions will impact labeling and clinician medication selection. Finally, how will hospitals deal with patient selection? These trials have become increasingly selective of the patient population, which has resulted in demonstration of benefits in a more narrow population. This creates the need for health systems to develop methods of applying these refined treatments to a population with a similarly low bleeding risk to realize the same patient outcomes. This is Dr. James Welker signing off from Clot Chronicles.